In Other News is made possible with the financial support of Ariel Investments and John Rogers and generous Chicagoans like you. Thank you.
A passion turned into a full-scale career. Our guest tonight is changing the way we think about and go about history. In recent decades, we've seen a lot of news about how many true, significant stories never made it into most textbooks. In other news, though, Dilla, the urban historian, is part of a new breed of detectives unearthing the stories with roots in the places all around us. Maybe they've been hidden, ignored, forgotten, or intentionally squashed. He often finds them hidden in plain sight, from the names of our neighborhoods to the buildings we pass every day. He shares it on all his platforms with 6 figures worth of followers. I guess I'm going to ask him if that's why his handle is 6-Figure Dilla. And since his storytelling is hyper-local, we like that here at CAN TV, what attracts so many from outside Chicago? Dilla has an answer to that, too. His own story is pretty dramatic, as the storyteller who went from having 2 jobs and no sleep to sudden unemployment and no certainty. And now, a promising future doing what he loves. So I mentioned we're live tonight from the CAN TV studios on the West Side, and all the people in the audience are alive also. Let me hear some applause if you can't wait to hear what Dilla has to say. Look at him. No sleep in here, because everybody has a story we'd like to hear or share, or maybe a story we don't even know we need to hear. The trick is to explore those stories one at a time with authenticity. A master of that, Dilla, the urban historian, joins us right on the other side of this break. Good job, audience.
I'm Andy Zopp, inviting you to join me for a special live edition of Chicago Newsroom 2.0, Mayor Johnson Goes to Washington, Wednesday, March 5th at 7:30 p.m. Watis Gathings, Francia Garcia Hernandez, and other special guests break down the mayor's testimony before Congress and what it all means to the city of Chicago. Join the community conversation live on CAN TV Cable Channel 19 or stream on cantv.org or on the CAN TV Plus app.
Hi, I'm financial educator Tamara Durbin. On the next episode of In the Money, we'll have money conversations with teens with my co-host Cannon Durbin and his guests Gavin, Matthew, and Deborah. Join the conversation Wednesday, March 5th at 7 p.m. exclusively on CAN TV Cable Channel 19 or stream live on cantv.org or on the CAN TV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
CAN TV is the lens through which Chicago's stories are told, harnessing the unifying power of community television. With CAN TV On Demand, immerse yourself in the richness of our city through exclusive stories and programs tailored just for you, connecting you to the heartbeats of our streets, the voices of our people, and the spirit that makes Chicago unique. Discover the strength of your community on CAN TV On Demand.
Every community has a story, a pulse, a voice waiting to be heard. At CAN TV, we bring these stories to life, from the heart of Chicago to your living room. Join us in supporting hyper-local television. Your backing helps us cover what matters directly in our communities, unfiltered and upfront. Help tell the important stories of our communities. Become a program underwriter today.
Welcome back. I want to get right to the man himself. First, thank you for making time to be in other news with us, because you're a busy guy, but that's nothing new. Tell us how you went from working full-time in a totally different industry, not historian anything, to being Dilla, the urban historian, on the side. How did that work? How is that in your life?
It's a two-part question, I would say. And one, thank you for having me. I'm such a huge fan. You know, grew up my life getting accurate news from you and knowing that I can trust the things that came from you. And so thank you for that, for being in our home.
That's very
my dad
nice.
was a Chicago police officer for 32 years. and there's a duality of being a black man with a dad that's a cop, right? And so outside, I'm having negative interactions with the police, and I'm also having my friends worry if I'm gonna tell if we leave the block or break curfew and all of that. But at the same time, the person that I respected the most, I saw him putting on the uniform, willing to give his life for the city. And so as a young man, I decided I wanted to know everything there was to know about this city that he was willing to die for. And so quietly, I was studying the history of Chicago for maybe about 2 decades. And then professionally, I was working for the light company. But then when the pandemic happened, my daughter at the time was 8. She wanted to launch a TikTok channel on her own.
Yay, for the little ones.
Right? But she wanted to do dances and that sort of thing. And I ain't much of a dancer. But I knew these Chicago stories. And so I thought if I fed her lines, she could tell the stories on TikTok and it would be a hit. She's like, Dad, don't nobody want to hear about no raggedy Chicago history. And so, you know, to prove her wrong and just to inspire her, I started making these videos. And I was going to make like 3 or 4 and then pass it on to her. And after that 3rd one, she still didn't want to do it. But I started to notice that people liked it. And so, you know, in my part-time, I was working as an area operator for the light company, you know, doing 16-hour shifts. And then I come home and get no sleep and stay up for 3-4 hours making another video. And I'm glad I did, right? It worked out.
So when you say work for the light company, you mean like a lineman? You were like underground and
Yes.
you were really working for for
yeah,
ComEd.
Absolutely. Yeah, working for ComEd as an area operator downtown. I've certainly been in hundreds of manholes. You know, my claim to fame is there's probably not a building downtown that I haven't been in and worked in. You know, when the power went out, people were stuck in the elevators, it was our job to bring them emergency power and get those elevators down. And anytime a new building was being constructed, it was my job to read the blueprints and see how much electricity they would need, and then set up the transformers and do the inspections on them. So yeah, real blue collar job for sure.
But also a real stable union job, right?
Very much so, yeah. Stable union job with a retirement coming in the future and a decent wage, right? You know, was proud that I was making like $60 an hour, you know. So.
6 figure.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, ComEd took notice at some point that you were getting a lot of attention for your historical videos, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did a video on dibs, right? You know how like you put your you put your ironing board out, your baby stroller, whatever you got to block the parking spot
Kids
after you
not
shut.
acting right, you make them sit out
Make
there.
them stand there. And so when I made that video, it got about 500,000 views. Then the Tribune came and everybody started to watch my old videos, and that kind of sped things up. And so ComEd noticed it, and at that time they had hired a PR firm because they were coming out of the Ann Parmajuri thing.
The trial of bribery and corruption, yes.
So that had just happened. And so they were trying to find ways to clean up their PR, and then lo and behold, here I come doing these history videos on the side. So they came to me and they said, hey, you know, at first it started with, can you make some of those videos with a ComEd hat on?
The hard hat?
Right. Can you make some of those videos and just happen to mention us about certain things, right? The Great Flood of '92 and all the work that it took on to get the water out of downtown and things of that nature. And I think it was a bad thing to do, so I did it. And then about 6 months after that, the new CEO, came to me and said, hey, we want you to be the digital content manager. We want you to be a brand ambassador for ComEd, but it's going to require you to leave your union job and take a management job. So I went home and told my wife that, and she made that same face you making. Like, no, we're not gonna do that. But what I thought about was taking that role. It paid half of what I was gonna make being an area operator, but it would allow me some flexibility to pursue the history tours that I was starting to do, and also to tell more stories. And I really thought that, you know, I was going to be the brand ambassador for the light company for the next 15 years.
So you had 2 jobs. You had one good full-time job with 2 part-time jobs, but it incorporated your passion.
So I accepted the new role, and maybe about a year into the role,
you were ready for retirement.
Oh, they were ready to retire me, is a better way to say it. You know, I just noticed that when I first got the role, I could text the CEO, he'd respond back fast. You know, if there was an event they would send me to go talk, right? Send me to communities and things of that nature. But then I started to ask to be sent to black schools to talk about the trades and how kids could get into that. Then the calls started to slow. And then I questioned them and said, hey, you promised me that I would be able to, represent Comet and be a brand ambassador for all the city, right? Not just going to the north side, not just going downtown. Then the calls stopped. And then one day I walked in the office and I got handed a letter letting me know that I was going to be laid off in September. I called him, he never answered the phone. I texted, he never answered. And then it was in that moment I was like, hey, bro, you're an absolute idiot for leaving that secure job and trusting corporate folks, right? A lot of times that hasn't worked out very well for people that look like me. But thankfully, my family we all sat down and my wife said, hey, you got us this far. I'm sure we're going to be fine. And it worked out.
Now get out there and get
Yeah, exactly.
But it has worked out. First of all, you are free to speak about that. We all know that when things don't end well, that usually companies say, we'll give some severance, but you got to sign this, non-disclosure. I'm not going to talk bad about you piece of paper. Was that offered to you?
Yeah, I certainly was offered a severance. One, I don't think there's any amount of money that's going to make it to where I can't tell my own story. Right? I'm a storyteller. And, we all own the power of our own stories. And so I wouldn't want anybody to take that away from me. And then secondly, here in Chicago, we had a historian by the name of Tamil Black. Mm-hmm. He lived to be 102, and pretty much everything we know about Bronzeville comes directly from his lived experience. And he was mentoring me for a little while. And when I sat with him, he said, Dilla, as long as you don't have a price, you can never sell out. And so I promised myself I would never have a price. And I didn't take the severance. And everybody thought I was crazy. My wife gave one of those looks you gave again, like, you sure you don't want to take that severance? But I didn't, because I didn't want them to be able to take away my ability to tell my own truths.
And even though that story about ComEd is certainly not the main story of your storytelling, it is part of your life, and to not be able to talk about it would be a problem, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you're enriching us with your stories. I hope it's enriching you. I know it is, emotionally and all that, but hopefully you can still be six-figure Dilla, right? Because it's important work. It really is. Right now you have joined the venerable Museum of Black History Museums in the country, DuSable Museum.
Yeah, absolutely. The DuSable Black History Museum is the oldest privately run Black History Museum in this country. I'm very honored to say that I'm the brand ambassador and chief of social media for this historic institution, right? We have the largest collection of African American artifacts, only second to the Smithsonian Black History Museum in DC. And I'm proud of that. And I'm particularly proud that this anchoring institution that's been telling the stories of Black America since 1961 started right in my city by a wonderful woman by the name of Dr. Margaret Burroughs and other artists, Charles Burroughs, Bernard Goss, and many others. And she also started the Southside Community Arts Center, right, with Gwendolyn Brooks,
in a house.
In a house. Both museums started in the houses, right? And I'm so proud to continue that legacy. And now I get to intertwine my love for Chicago history with what I do every day for work. And one of the goals is going to be to inspire young folks here in Chicago to care more about their history and get them into the building.
Get them into the building. That's if people pass by on their way to the Museum of Science and Industry, on their way to the Art Institute, on the way, when it is so rich right there, and could be richer if it had more support, right? If you go, the things that you say you care about and look up one day and they're gone, and you realize you haven't supported it, and that's why it's gone. Yep. So you're doing these mahogany tours. You have launched a new show, and you like the multiple job thing, don't you? And you're at the DuSable Museum, but they all work together. So as social media for the DuSable Museum, which I'm not going to throw any shade, but I think they could use some help with the social media, and especially reaching younger people. How has that worked out for you?
It's working out well. We got some amazing things planned. Brother got 7 kids, so I need at least 3 jobs at all times. You got 7 kids? Oh, yes. Yeah, so I always need a couple jobs. But no, it's working well. I already see the difference in numbers with the posts that I've helped curate, right? Mm-hmm. We're seeing, 5-digit, 6-digit views on our Instagram reel. And what I'm looking forward to is maybe young people weren't around in the 90s and saw the exhibits that were there, but we still have them in our special collection storage. So So I want to bring those exhibits out and tell the stories about them. And they don't have to take up the museum space, right? There's only so much room for so many displays, but there's tons of room on the internet. And so we can bring those stories back to life. And so that way, hopefully seeing those exhibits online will encourage you to come inside. We're also getting ready to start a program where we're going to ask young people what do they want to see in the museum. Maybe I don't want to see a G Herbo microphone because I'm old, but the young folks might. And that's a part.
I don't know what a G Herbo microphone is. Okay,
right?
so.
Well, he's a rapper from Chicago, and he speaks a lot to the youth, you know. And so if that's what it takes to get them in there to learn the history of the Equiano or to see John Tweed's photos of Dr. King on the west side of Chicago.
Kind of while I'm here, I'm learning some other stuff.
We're going to go get that G Herbo microphone. So we're getting ready to start take surveys in Chicago high schools to see what do you all want to see in your museum, because we're only the caretakers for a little while. The next generation is going to have to come behind us. We need them to show interest right now.
Right. So I would like to acknowledge we have quite a few young people in our audience today. I appreciate y'all being here. I hope somebody didn't make you do it as a school assignment, and if they did, I hope you're glad you're here. So you don't know shy, which is very cute. Nice play on words, and I hope that people don't too often replace that last word. You have a new YouTube program, a series on YouTube. So it's almost like you've branched out in multiple ways since turning that bad news into good news. Tell me about You Don't Know Shy.
Yeah, so that was sitting in the office in my house, following being laid off, and it's like, hey, you can sit and sulk with your free time or you can get active. So I partnered with a production company called Digify, and this is live, so I can't believe I'm telling this story, but right before I got laid off, I called Fidelity and said, hey, send me some of that 401k money because I'm getting ready to make my own show.
Invest in
and
yourself.
I'm going to bet on myself, absolutely, right? You know, so with the money that I received, I called Digify, and we're producing You Don't Know Shy, and it's professionally shot with cameraman and boom mics and all kind of stuff. You know, it's properly edited. And the theme of the show was in the name, right? There are people who live their whole entire lives in Chicago. You might have grew up going to Maxwell Street, the open air market, and buying your fake gold chain and eating a Polish from Jim's Original. But then I stop and ask you, why is Halsted Street called Halsted Street? And most people won't know, right? Well, Halsted is Halsted Street is so hilarious. It's named for two dudes who never even came to Chicago. Our first mayor is William Ogden, and he wanted to buy land further south, which is now the land that the stockyards used to be on. He ran out of money, so he called his cousins, the Halsted brothers, who were bankers in New York, and he said, if y'all loan me this money, I'll name one of Chicago's longest streets after you. As the first mayor, he could do that.
I wonder, are we still held to that? Can we can break that covenant by now, can't we?
Well, I don't know. Maybe he got it submitted in pretty good there. It's just things of that nature, right? What I always say every day, particularly on our tour bus, is if it has a name, it has a history, right? And so look into the history of these things that are named, right? And so many people that grew up in Princeton Park, right on 95th Street, they played Little League at Abbott Park their whole lives, and they don't know that Abbott Park is named for Robert Abbott, the founder of the Chicago Defender. Or you go to Frank Gillespie, and you don't know that Gillespie is named after the founder of the Supreme Liberty Life Insurance Company, which was one of the first black-owned insurance companies in our country. You know, who is Dan Ryan Jr.? He's the first Cook County president to never be indicted, right? So, so You Don't Know Shy is designed to either take a Chicagoan or a transplant Chicagoan and give them a tour in their neighborhood and talk about those things. We've had Father Michael Flagers getting ready to be our next episode. Of course, we've had former Mayor Lori Lightfoot. We had Thomas Lennon, who's one of the creators of Reno 911. We just had Corporate, who's a burgeoning Chicago influencer and artist who has millions of followers. We're working real hard on George McCaskey, who's the owner of the Bears. And it's all designed to teach them about the city, but also teach the viewer about the city. Absolutely.
And why are people that aren't from Chicago interested in Chicago?
Well, because it's like I say, everything dope about America comes from Chicago, right? It's an absolute fact.
And yet we hear all kinds of, terrible monikers that are given to Chicago. What do you said that you what do you call it, doing? Myth busting.
Myth busting, yep.
And are people once you present the facts, how do people respond?
You know, they're always surprised on one end of the spectrum, but they appreciate learning the truth. You know, if you're outside of Chicago, the national news makes it seem like as soon as you get here, somebody's going to steal your car, they're going to force deep dish pizza down your throat, you're going to have to dodge 2 shootouts on the way to the hotel, and that's not the case here. Just today, I had a group of college students from Wabash College, which is an all-male college that's in the central part of Indiana. 25 dudes, mixed race, never been to Chicago, and quite frankly, scared to be on the South Side with me. And by the end of the tour, they're sitting in Sean Michelle Ice Cream Shop on 47th Street, eating ice cream outside on 47th in Wabash, not afraid of nothing, because that's not what Chicago is. Do we have problems? Absolutely. Are there people that deal in the streets? For sure.
In every city.
In every place in the world, you know. But if you're not robbing somebody's granny or doing something wrong to somebody, most of the time the harm doesn't come your way. And that changes how they view about Chicago. But also, I point out what you've been missing by thinking of Chicago as a negative place, right? If you live in, you know, Racine, Wisconsin, or Des Moines, Iowa, and you're scared to take that 2-hour drive to Chicago because what the national news has said, then you're missing out on a Michelin star restaurant like Virtue, right, with a James Beard Award-winning chef. You're missing out on, you know, visiting the DuSable. You're missing out on seeing plays. You're missing out
Park,
the Gold Dome. You're missing out on that's an architectural gem to the world. You know, and you're missing out on all these things out of fear. And not just that, Chicago is a very sustainable and affordable city. So you can rent a room in our best hotel downtown for $130 a night. It's gonna cost you $350 in New York. You can travel to Pullman and see where Labor Day comes from while enjoying AP Deli, you know.
You're talking about all these things that are about Chicago, and yes, it is about Chicago, but your focus is unapologetically Black Chicago.
I would say my focus is done through a Black lens.
Okay.
It's about all of Chicago. You know, I got to speak at a conference for all surgeons, and it was a bunch of
surgeons, like doctors,
cut you open surgeons, right? And the room was filled with South Asian, Indian Americans, and Chinese Americans. So here come lanky Dilla walking out with his locks and his Jordans on, who ain't a doctor, and I was able to tell them that Margaret Haiding Lin is the first ever woman accepted into the International College of Surgeons. She's a Chinese American from Chinatown. Because the Chinese in Chinatown were being discriminated during the 30s and 40s from hospitals, she delivered in homes over 9,000 babies in Chinatown. I got to tell—
They didn't know that.
Right? Got to tell the Indian folks about, you know, why Devon Avenue is the place where you can get the spices of India. And they moved here because of the tech boom in the 90s, and got to tell them about the pioneering young students who went to Truman and other colleges that are on the north side, and they planted their flags in. And that's how it grew.
You have 150 more stories, I know, about all that. And if we really want to know, we'll either take a mahogany tour, check out You Don't Know Shy on YouTube, and be more connected to the DuSable Museum. You are just an amazing— I don't want to ask you about the worst thing that happened to you on a tour. I want to ask you about the best thing.
Oh, you're going to mess around and make me cry thinking about those things. The best thing that happened to me on the tour is we did a tour of Bridgeport and Back of the Yards. And if you go to 43rd and Halsted, you'll see the Chicago Union Stockyard Gate. That's a Chicago landmark that's still there. Behind that is the Firefighters Memorial. And sadly, on both sides are the names of firemen who lost their lives during fighting fires. So it was an out-of-town group. As soon as the tour started, the lady tells us that her great uncle was a fireman for Chicago, but she never knew much about him. He died fighting fire. When we got there, when we get to as we're getting closer to the Firefighters Memorial, she tells us that he died Christmas Eve, and he fell off the fire truck because back then they didn't have all the safety, and he died on the way to fight the fire. And because he died on Christmas Eve, her great-grandma hated Christmas. So then that passed on to her grandma and then her mother. Christmas wasn't a thing because of bad memories. And when she saw that memorial, She saw the name of a person she never met, but she saw that Chicago was honoring them. So she pulled out her lipstick, asked me for a piece of paper, and she traced out his name on that paper off the monument with that lipstick. And everybody out there was crying. I'm trying to be cool. I'm all to the side doing like this.
When history is real,
You
and
know,
it
that
touches
was the best thing that's ever happened to me on the tour.
Well, that's your gift. And we appreciate you, and we're going to support you so that your gifts can continue to multiply. Dilla, the urban historian, You Don't Know Shy, Mahogany Tours, the Sable Museum, Chicago's very own. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm back with this week's edition of Robin's Nest right after this break.
I'm Andy Zopp, inviting you to join me for a special live edition of Chicago Newsroom 2.0, Mayor Johnson Goes to Washington, Wednesday, March 5th at 7:30 p.m. Watis Gathings, Francia Garcia Hernandez, and other special guests break down the mayor's testimony before Congress and what it all means to the city of Chicago. Join the community conversation live on CAN-TV Cable Channel 19 or stream on cantv.org or on the CAN-TV Plus app.
Hi, I'm financial educator Tamara Durbin. On the next episode of In the Money, we'll have money conversations with teens with my co-host Cannon Durbin and his guests Gavin, Matthew, and Deborah. Join the conversation Wednesday, March 5th at 7 p.m. exclusively on CAN-TV Cable Channel 19 or stream live on cantv.org or on the CAN-TV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling, experience the power of community television.
CAN TV is the lens through which Chicago's stories are told, harnessing the unifying power of community television. With CAN TV on demand, immerse yourself in the richness of our city through exclusive stories and programs tailored just for you, connecting you to the heartbeats of our streets, the voices of our people, and the spirit that makes Chicago unique. Discover the strength of your community on CAN TV On Demand.
Every community has a story, a pulse, a voice waiting to be heard. At CAN TV, we bring these stories to life, from the heart of Chicago to your living room. Join us in supporting hyper-local television. Your backing helps us cover what matters directly in our communities, unfiltered and upfront. Help tell the important stories of our communities. Become a program underwriter today.
Truth, fun, and blackness. I think Dilla, the urban historian, hit every goal of this program. Thanks again to him, to you for being interested in the new wave of historians, to our fabulous and engaged live studio audience. That's y'all too. It feels like we've all been deputized to contribute to revealing the untold stories of Chicago. They are, by and large, the stories of those who were not writing the history books. What I'm thinking is that this is a wonderful digital transformation and expansion of a legacy of Chicago's black historians. Many did write books, of course. They just were not part of the assignment. Temuel Black, Lerone Bennett set the record straight in huge volumes of well-researched and illuminating documents. John H. Johnson created an unprecedented platform for black stories with Ebony magazine based here in Chicago. But Johnson told me how he had to take the train to Detroit every week for years, just trying to convince the car makers that readers of black stories were worthy of their advertising dollars. It was the huge readership of Ebony and Jet that finally closed the deal. Fast forward to today, when Ebony is working to be resurrected and relevant in the digital age and a whole new financial model. What is not new is that the audience still closes the deal. That's you, that's us, subscribing to, liking, sharing, supporting, responding to the storytelling that reveals the real past and changes the landscape for our real place in history and the future. If you have a story to share, email me at robinsothersnews@gmail.com. Now let me go into this audience, see how many of these people need help figuring out how to find Dilla on YouTube or on the various social media platforms that they may not. Maybe young people can help us out. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. It's been a nice show. I appreciate you so much. Y'all are the best audience ever. 'Cause I